What is going on, guys? It's Jack Gills 1875 here, and today we'll be taking a dive into the depths, or should I say murky depths, of Moldovan football, Europe's most corrupt. And this is a video that you guys voted for on the Twitter poll. A great level of engagement yet again. I love engaging with you guys. I love that you're voting for these videos because I know it's something that you want to see. And it was a close one in the poll, but Moldovan football won, and I'm glad because this is a really interesting story. Researching this was absolutely brilliant. It took me to places I never really expected to go in terms of researching a video. So really interesting one today. So in this video I'll be covering wider corruption in Moldova, the match fixing scandals, the links to Russian Mafia, football in the breakaway state of Transnistria, and the rise of FC Sheriff, or should I say the controversial rise of FC Sheriff, Moldova's most successful team. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer: I do not speak Moldovan. There is some hard pronunciations in here. If I get it wrong, I do apologise. Like I said, my Moldovan's a bit rusty, so I do apologise if I get any pronunciations wrong. Now I've got that pronunciation disclaimer out the way, because I will butcher some of them. I hope you enjoy the video, and let's jump right into it. Before we talk about corruption in Moldovan football, I think it's important we talk about corruption in Moldova in general, because it is very important to our story so that you can understand corruption in the Moldovan football more when you see corruption in Moldova in general. You can see the situation, because it's really bad. I'm going to warn you now, it's really bad. And you can sort of understand it before we look at it through the lens of football. And then I also want to sort of raise the plight of the Moldovan people, because the corruption in their country, it's not you and me it affects. It's not the people doing it that affects, doing the corruption that affects. It's the Moldovan people. It's the average Moldovan man, woman or child on the ground in places like Chisinau, Bakhmut and Tiraspol. That's who it affects. It doesn't affect anybody else apart from the average Moldovan people. So ever since Moldova became independent from the Soviet Union in 1991, corruption has been rife. It has been widespread. Now, Moldova has a World Corruption Index score of 34, making it the second most corrupt country in Europe behind Ukraine, second only to Ukraine. So, the World Corruption Index, what is that, I hear you ask? It is basically a score that a country gets based on its corruption. So, it's between 1 and 100. Now, 100 is everything's clean, there's no corruption, it's a happy place. I think you won't be surprised to hear that no country gets 100. The best country in the world in terms of no corruption is New Zealand, and they have a score of 88. And then 1 is corruption's widespread, it's absolutely systemic, it's everywhere. Now, no country has a score of 1. The worst country is North Korea with a score of 18. So North Korea is the most corrupt country in the world, New Zealand's the least corrupt. Now, Moldova, more importantly, has a score of 34, which makes it really bad. Now, to put that into perspective, the UK has a score of 77, making it the 4th least corrupt country in Europe, as opposed to Moldova being the 2nd most corrupt country in Europe. So just to put that into a bit of perspective for you. Now, this corruption has led to Moldova being Europe's poorest country. Not one of the poorest, the poorest country in Europe. So the average Moldovan person, the average wage in Moldova is only 7,385 leu a month. Now, leu is the Moldovan currency. To make that into terms we can understand a bit more, I've done it in euros. That is 378 euros a month. Now, in comparison, the average wage in the UK is around 550 euros a week. So, an average worker in Britain earns nearly double what an average worker in Moldova earns in a month. So we earn more in a week, or nearly double in a week, than a Moldovan person earns in a month. That's putting it into perspective. And why is this? Because the Moldovan economy is pillaged by Russian oligarchs and the politicians in Moldova. Now, the president, Mia Sandu, she is a right piece of work. Spending thousands of dollars on the best of designer gear. The most controversial one she did was on a state visit to Russia. She bought herself a $2,000 Louis Vuitton handbag in GUM, the famous department store in Moscow, because, you know what, she can. Whilst the average person in her country is having to sell their organs to feed their family, you know, having to sell their organs in the black market to feed their family, or fake Romanian identity papers to get work abroad to feed their family, she is spending thousands on a designer handbag. Now, that's the president of the country, ladies and gentlemen, right there. She also builds herself private palaces, buys herself cars, gives backhanders to the oligarchs that she likes, and it just leads to the Moldovan people suffering. Now, we're going to talk about the Moldovan police in a minute, because they are just as bad as their boss, Madam Sandu, Madam President. And this sort of spending money on herself and everything has led to Moldova having lots of problems. Now, in rural areas, there is no electricity, there is no running water, there's no infrastructure in general. The people in the rural areas of Moldova live very simple, hard lives, and they literally just have to work with what they've got. There's no shops because the government don't want to spend money on setting shops up. They have to make their own produce, and it's a tough life out in the Moldovan countryside. In the cities, it's not really any better. Now, the capital city, Chisinau, is so down at heel. Like, the pavements are all cracked, the apartment block buildings are all ruined, and there's not been any work done on them for years. There's rolling power cuts, there's abandoned buildings everywhere, the roads are all potholed, the public transport rarely ever works, and that is what happens to the Moldovan people. Actually, they've got to put up with, because Maya Sandu is more interested in buying a $2,000 Louis Vuitton handbag than helping her country out. There's also the Russian oligarchs who just take from the Moldovan economy. Now, one Russian businessman actually got put in prison in Russia for embezzling, I think it was about $1 million rubles. I'm not quite sure about the exchange rate there, but embezzling $1 million rubles worth of Moldovan money out of the Moldovan economy and taking it to Russia. So that's how bad the situation is. You'll see pictures flashing up as well of the capital Chisinau and the sort of rural areas in Moldova. Now, we're going to talk about the Moldovan police. The Moldovan police have been ranked the most corrupt national police force in Europe. That just tells you what you need to know. They're in the pocket of the Russian Mafia. They're effectively the muscle for hire, the uniform muscle for hire of the Russian Mafia and the Russian oligarchs. They'll do whatever they say. And this has led to high levels of police brutality, and the police not helping people. They expect backhanders to help people, and of course the people don't have money to give the police backhanders, so they're not going to get any help. So police brutality is really bad in Moldova. Moldovan people don't get treated very nicely by the police force. At a recent anti-corruption rally in Chisinau, the police were very heavy-handed, and a lot of people got hurt, and even somebody died because of the injuries they sustained due to a police beating. So there's the problems there, and basically the police do whatever the mafia tell them to do. And we're going to be talking about the chief of the Chisinau police force later on in this video, who is a right piece of work, because he's involved in a match-fixing scandal. He's involved in a match-fixing scandal. Now, another issue in Moldova is the war with the breakaway state of Transnistria. Now, it's something that I'll explain later on in the video, but effectively, Transnistria doesn't want to be part of Moldova, and Madam Sandu, Madam President, decides to use the issues with Transnistria as a sort of cover-up for her actions. So she hides behind nationalism and everything like that to cover up her own failings and the failings of the politicians in Moldova. And then there's also the fact that corruption is widespread in Transnistria. Transnistria doesn't get off lightly. And again, when we talk about Sheriff Tiraspol, you're going to find out that Transnistria doesn't really have the moral high ground in that situation. It's probably just as, if not more, corrupt than the country it's trying to break away from. So there is a general picture of how bad things are in Moldova. The capital city has no infrastructure, people having to sell their organs and illegally immigrate into other countries to get a bit of money to put clothes on their back and feed their families, all while politicians and business people fund themselves off the Moldovan economy. So that is how bad corruption really is in Moldova. And there'll be various pictures throughout this bit flashing up that you'll see. So yeah, that is how bad the situation is in Moldova. Now you know how bad the situation in Moldova. We're going to talk about some of the match-fixing scandals and corruption within the Moldovan FA. We're going to move on to the football side of things now. So there you have it. That is corruption in Moldova in general. As you can see, the problems are pretty widespread. So is it any surprise that corruption is really bad within the Moldovan game? It's ruined the lives of the Moldovan people, and it's ruining the Moldovan game as well. And this is what we're now moving on to, what we've all been waiting for: corruption in Moldovan football, what this video is all about. And they start off at the most prevalent issue, issue, which is match fixing. And match fixing in Moldova is absolutely rife. I'm going to tell you now, it makes the Calciopoli scandal look like a minor indiscretion. I'm sure everybody remembers the Calciopoli scandal in Italy. That shocked a lot of people when it broke in places like Britain and Germany. It absolutely shocked us. Hadn't really seen anything on that scale before. In Moldova, they probably sat and thought, oh, I wish our league was that clean. The match fixing scandals in Moldova are making the Calciopoli scandals seem like nothing. Basically, now whilst it's rife all the time, the most notable example is the 2013-14 season when 1xBet, the owner of 1xBet, the big Russian betting company, managed to fix the league to meet his agenda. So basically, Dinamo Auto Tiraspol looks set to get their first ever Moldovan National Division title, which is the Moldovan top league, the Moldovan First Division. And what happened was, miraculously, because 1xBet were going to have to pay out a lot if they'd won the league, miraculously, they hit a very bad run of form and their players were all betting against them. And they soon crashed down the league quite a little bit until they were safely away from the top spot, so 1xBet didn't need to pay out. That seems fair to me. That seems all very above board to me, to be honest. Yeah, so that's the most notable match fixing scandal. Oh, there has been other ones, and we're about to move on to talking about those, but I just want to get the 1xBet one out of the way, which was the one with when Dinamo Auto Tiraspol were about to win the league, and 1xBet are going to have to pay out, I think, in euros, it was probably in total in bets about 2 or 3 million euros we're going to have to pay out across the sort of former Soviet, because a lot of former Soviet Union, obviously a lot of Moldovans live in Russia and everything. They're going to have to pay it out across their shops across Russia and everything, and they didn't want to do that. So very kindly, the Dinamo Auto players started betting against their own team, and they started throwing matches. So that was the most notable one. We're now going to move on to talking about the head of the Moldovan FA and his involvement in match fixing. So this man right here is Leonardo Ching, the head of the Moldovan FA, and he has been a very naughty boy when it comes to match fixing. On 5 separate occasions that we know of, he's been caught betting against teams because he was paid to bet against them. You see what I mean? So he was involved in the 1xBet scandal. He was paid to bet against Dinamo Auto Tiraspol. He's also been caught betting against the other Tiraspol, Sheriff Tiraspol, because basically Sheriff Tiraspol needed to sort of win this game, and this betting company didn't want to pay out, so they gave Olenichenko money to bet against them, so it would sort of even it up a bit in terms of bets and everything like that. It was a whole horrible scandal. And also, Leonid Olenichenko has been caught having meetings with owners of other clubs saying, oh yeah, I'll get you a few results there, I'm powerful, I can convince players to throw games and everything like that. Now that's the head of the FA that's doing that. Again, he makes Sepp Blatter look clean. So basically, he has nice fancy lunches where he's been meeting with club owners saying, right, I can convince so-and-so to throw a game and everything like that. I think he's been caught on 5 separate occasions betting against clubs in the division to sort of fit in the agendas with betting companies and everything like that. Probably not the only time that that's happened. Those are 5 times we know about. It's probably been about 500 times in his tenure. And he's also been involved in getting contracts to build stadiums when there wasn't really money to build stadiums and everything like that. So basically that's the head of the FA, like I was saying. That's pretty shocking. That's the man that's in charge of football in the country. He's in charge of the national team. He's in charge of the governing body. He's in charge of everything, of all things football in Moldova, and he's betting against teams when you're not meant to. He's meeting his friends saying, I can convince so-and-so to throw games or else he'll end up in a ditch or something like that. And he's he's awarding stadium contracts and convincing the government to award stadium contracts when there's no money to do it. So that is Leonid Olenichenko. Like I said when we started talking about him, very naughty boy he has been in terms of corruption. So that was it. He's been involved in most prevalently match fixing though, and he wasn't too far away from the 1xBet scandal, like I was saying. Basically, he convinced the Zimbru players to throw their game against Sheriff so that Sheriff would jump Dynamo Auto and go top of the league. So he managed to convince Zimbru Chisinau to, throw the game. Now, we're now going to move on to talking about the Moldovan national team and their players, because it's not just off the pitch, it's also the guys on the pitch that have been involved in match-fixing scandals within Moldova and abroad as well. If the head of the Moldovan FA is so corrupt, then is it any surprise that the national team players are corrupt as well? No, it isn't. The national team players have been involved in several match-fixing and betting scandals, not just in Moldova, but in other countries as well. So, yep, several Moldovan national team players have been involved in match-fixing and betting scandals, and that's because of how prevalent the Russian Mafia are in Moldova. Basically, they put pressure on the players, they lean on the players to get involved in match-fixing and betting scandals in other countries. Now, in several leagues, there has been match-fixing and betting scandals where a Moldovan player hasn't been far away. Romania, Armenia, Russia, Italy, Azerbaijan. There's been several foreign leagues where a Moldovan player has been involved in a match-fixing or betting scandal. Now, the man that will be coming up on your screen very soon is Artur Yanutia, who plays for Caligari in Italy. Sorry to my Italian friends there. Caligari in Italy. Now, basically, we're talking about the Calciopoli scandal, and Artur Yanutia was right at the centre of the Calciopoli scandal. Obviously, Caligari, one of the clubs involved in the Calciopoli scandal. And yeah, good old Artur, who has been capped for Moldova quite a few times, was right at the centre of it all and got slapped a hefty ban by the Italian FA. And I think went out on loan to Moldova for a little while to sort of circumvent that, which is more corruption. But yeah, he got slapped a hefty ban by the Italian FA, and he was really lucky that he wasn't sort of forced out of football. But there was a lot of dodgy things, crime families in Italy, Russian Mafia, putting pressure on him to put bets on and everything like that when he was at Caligari. So there you go, Artur Yanutia is the most notable one. There's also been Catalan Karp with Ufa in Russia. He was involved in a match-fixing scandal in the Russian second division as well, but it's not as famous, obviously, as the incident with the Yanutia at Caligari. So that is really sort of just a little taster of, it's not just the officials that are doing it, it's the sort of players as well. And they're regularly doing it because organised crime and everything like that are leaning on them. A lot of them have their boots sponsored by betting companies and everything like that. So they're under pressure to do bad things as well. So yeah, that was a bit about the Moldovan national team. Now going to move on to the scandal with Zimbru Chisinau and their Europa League spot, getting the Europa League spot a couple of seasons back. Basically, the Zimbru Chisinau scandal sort of is a symbol or a metaphor, if you like, of Moldovan football. Basically, this scandal sums up Moldovan football. So, a few seasons back, Zimbru Chisinau were just sort of sitting, one of Moldova's oldest and most successful clubs, was sitting just sort of around outside the European spots, and their owner and the Moldovan government and the Chisinau chief of police, he's again, and this isn't the first time he's been at this sort of thing, as we discussed earlier, decided, you know what, Zimbru need a Europa League spot. So what we'll do is we'll get round, I know what we'll do, we'll have a little whip round. They managed to raise €150,000, and that €150,000 went straight into Olechenko's pocket. And magically, with that €150,000, Zimbru Chisinau bought their way into Europa League qualifiers, where they got beat by St Joseph's from Gibraltar. Because, funnily enough, your dirty money doesn't really extend into Europa League, because Gibraltar is such a small place, it can't be corrupted. So they got put out by St Joseph's old Zimbru that year. But that sort of symbolises the issues within Moldovan football, the Moldovan game, that basically, if you give the head of the FA €150,000, you're getting a Europa League spot. Now, for 250,000 or 350,000, you might be able to get the league title. You never know. They might have even raised some more money. But basically, Zimbru were sitting just outside with a few games to go with the other teams in better form, and miraculously, they managed to get into that Europa League spot, all thanks to €150,000 payment. Now, how do we know about this? A few sort of whistleblowers at Zimbru managed to release it out to the Romanian press, and that's the sort of where it all got found out. Of course, the club deny it and the Moldovan FA deny it, but it's just dirty money, isn't it? That's basically, like I was saying, symbolises Moldovan football. The fact that Zimbru Chisinau, despite having a not too good season, can pay €150,000 to the FA, and the Europa League spot gets picked up. So yeah, that's how bad it is in Moldova. I think we're beginning to paint a picture here with the sort of match fixing things with the players and the head of the FA and everything like that. And like I said, the chief of the Chisinau police force was involved in that, so that tells you all we need to know. We're now going to move on to the even darker side of this, which is the links to the Russian Mafia. So now we're going to move on to the darkest part of this story, and all of it's dark, but I suppose this is the darkest part of it in terms of the sort of underbelly, and that is the links to the Russian Mafia that Moldovan football has. You know, the Russian Mafia, I think we've all seen the John Wick movies, we know what they're like, they're not nice people, and the Russian Mafia are heavily involved in Moldovan football. I mean, it's beyond beggars' belief how badly involved the Mafia are in Moldovan football, and They do all sorts. So the first thing is convincing players to throw matches. And I think you all know what I mean by convincing. Basically, players and their families are threatened if they don't do what the Mafia want. And basically, a lot of Moldovan players have quit the game because of Mafia pressure. You know, the Mafia boss will say, you'll never play again. And the Mafia are involved in getting a lot of Moldovan players out to Russia as well. So I suppose, yeah, that's the one big thing, is convincing players. Like I said, convincing, we all know what convincing means. It probably involves a metal crowbar. Convincing Moldovan players to throw games. There's a lot of that going on in the league. Organised crime's heavily involved in the Moldovan national division, and there's been a lot of matches thrown because the Mafia are putting illegal bets out, or they want a certain result to go their way. So there is that one. The other issue is betting scandals. Now, we've talked about betting scandals repeatedly. Well, the Mafia are involved in those illegal betting shops that the Moldovan FA sort of endorsed. Now, that isn't just in Moldova. These ones have sort of spilled over into Romania and Ukraine as well. That basically, because the Moldovan FA says it's okay, because Olnichenko's friends with these guys in the Mafia, basically these illegal betting shops that take advantage of football fans all over Ukraine and Romania as well. Basically, the Moldovan FA are sanctioning them because they're in the pocket of the Mafia. So those are the big one, the betting scandal. Then there is the most sinister event in this, which was the bomb attack on a Moldovan FA official's car. So basically, a Moldovan FA official who was not named in the article that I read this in, basically refused to have a game thrown. He was a referee. He refused to throw a game. Basically, he went out to his car. Luckily, the bomb was mistimed, so he knew something was wrong when he'd seen men mucking about at his car, and it went off. Now, luckily, he wasn't inside. Nobody of his family were inside, anything like that. Nobody was nearby. It was in an empty car park. But still, that is a really scary thing to have happened, that there was a bomb attack on an official's car because he refused to sort of throw a game for the Mafia. And that is basically that is the tip of the iceberg. There was also a dawn raid in Moscow where this Russian crime boss, basically, was a dawn raid in Moscow of his flat, and loads of documents pertaining to match fixing in Moldova and other parts of the former Soviet Union were found in there as well. So the Russian Mafia heavily involved in match fixing and sort of corruption in general within the Moldovan game. Like I say, convincing players to throw games, betting scandals, and of course the most sinister of them all, that bomb attack on the referee's car when he refused to throw a game, blowing the car up, which is the most sinister, and there's been death threats and everything from the Mafia. So a pretty serious involvement there from the Russian Mafia, and that is the really, really dark underbelly of Moldovan football. We're now going to move on to talking about the breakaway state of Transnistria. So we're now going to talk about Transnistria. You heard me mention Transnistria earlier, so before we talk about the sort of football side things in Transnistria, I'm going to talk about what Transnistria is. So basically, Transnistria is a little sliver of land in the east of Moldova that wants to become independent from Moldova because they speak Russian. Now, Moldovans speak Moldovan, which is effectively Romanian. They speak it's like a dialect of Romanian. And Transnistrians are ethnically Russian and speak Russian. So they wanted to separate from Moldova because Moldova wanted closer ties with the EU and Romania, and Transnistria wanted to maintain ties with Russia. So that's why Transnistria wanted to break off, and at the same time Moldova declared independence from the Soviet Union. Transnistria declared independence from Moldova. Effectively, there was a big war. Now, obviously it's a football video, so I don't know what to explain that much, but there was a big war, and to this day there is still Russian and Ukrainian UN peacekeepers. There's loads of checkpoints you have to go through. Tiraspol is the capital of Transnistria. We've mentioned this before in the video, this place before. Tiraspol is got a military cordon around it, and the conflict and the tensions are so bad that it could flare up at any minute between Moldova and Transnistria. And effectively what's happening is Transnistria wants to have a referendum to say, do you want to be part of Moldova, do you want to be an independent country and have closer ties with Russia? And Moldova says they can't have that referendum. So that's a little background to Transnistria. I thought it'd be good for you to know what Transnistria is because I've mentioned it a few times. Now I'm going to talk about the two Transnistrian clubs and how they've sort of become the most successful within the Moldovan game. So we'll move on to that now. So paradoxically, two of Moldova's most successful clubs, Dinamo Auto Tiraspol and Sheriff Tiraspol, both come from, you guessed it, Tiraspol, which is the capital of Transnistria, the breakaway state which we were just talking about. And they are the two sort of most successful clubs in Moldova these days. Sheriff Tiraspol especially are actually the record Moldovan champions now, as I mentioned in the video about the best club from each republic of the Soviet Union. So, you know, why has this happened? Well, I think you've guessed it because of the theme of the video. It is because of corruption. It's basically, Sheriff Tiraspol and Dinamo Auto Tiraspol get a lot of money from the Transnistrian government and the Russian government to basically promote Transnistria within Moldova. So it's sort of an up yours to Moldova, if you like, from Transnistria, that their two clubs are the two most successful within Moldovan football, when the clubs that are Moldovan and actually want to be part of Moldova, from places that actually want to be part of Moldova, are struggling and are losing money and everything, whilst Dinamo Auto and Sheriff are spending loads of money, getting good players, regularly getting into Europe in Sheriff's case, record champions in Sheriff's case. And that's it. It's all very corrupt because, like I was saying, the Sheriff Tiraspol connections to not just the Transnistrian government but the Russian government are pretty dodgy, and it's all about Putin's thing of promoting what he wants as well. So that's where all Sheriff Tiraspol stands. Dinamo Auto, I just have a lot of money. Again, the Transnistrian government pumps a lot of money into the clubs to make them look good within the Moldovan game. And whilst that sort of grubby stuff's going on at boardroom level, on a positive note, it has actually brought Moldovans and Transnistrians together on the terraces as they sort of become more pal with each other, more integration, because Transnistria has its own national team which isn't recognised by anybody, but doesn't have its own league. So I suppose that's a good thing, but unfortunately the Transnistrian clubs are doing well through corrupt means because the Transnistrian government and the Russian government pump millions of euros into the two Transnistrian clubs, so they'll be successful. And basically, you know, it's a form of Cold War and subterfuge against Moldova, if you like, as well. So I thought it would be nice to sort of just give a little brief nod to Transnistria because they are important to what we're going to talk about next, which is the big case in point within Moldovan football. We're now going to move on to FC Sheriff Tiraspol, a club that is the symbol of corruption in Moldovan football. They've got their fingers in all sorts of bad pies around not just Moldovan football but European football. So we're going to talk about Sheriff Tiraspol now, and I thought it'd be good to sort of get the Transnistria stuff talked about so we can move on to talking about Sheriff Tiraspol. So we'll jump right to that. We're now going to talk about Sheriff Tiraspol, Moldova's most successful club, but also the club that symbolises everything that this video's been about and the horrific corruption within Moldovan football. So basically, Sheriff Tiraspol, from a purely footballing point of view, are a good club. They've won 18 Moldovan titles and look set to claim their 19th this season, which will also be their 4th in a row. They're currently 13 points clear at the top of the league with a game in hand. As well, they regularly get into Europe. They have an excellent squad, a really good multinational squad, and on the pitch they've really been developing the Moldovan game and promoting the Moldovan game. Of course, we talked about them in my video about the best club from each part of the former Soviet Union, but really, yeah, they've been promoting the Moldovan game and promoting Moldova on a European stage, and yeah, they've been dominating Moldovan football. And I would say, if you didn't know what was coming next, rightly so, they've got a good squad. Well, the reason Sheriff Tiraspol have sort of got to this point is it's quite dark, shall we say. It's very corrupt, like as we should expect at this point in the video. Of course it's going to be corrupt. So that's what this section of video is going to be about. So like I said, I thought I'd give you a bit of background to Sheriff Tiraspol. They were founded not long after the Transnistrian conflict and have fast become Moldova's most successful club, which is ironic given that they're in a city that doesn't even want to be part of Moldova. So yeah, they fast become Moldova's most successful club. They have great players. They have Greek internationals, Malawian internationals, relative of George Weah plays for them. There's a Liberia international, relative of George Weah plays for Sheriff Tiraspol. They've got loads of fantastic players, and they on the face of it, do deserve their success. But like I was saying, as we know in this video, they don't deserve their success because, as we've learnt about Moldovan football, things aren't always as they seem. And in the background, let's just say Sheriff Tiraspol have had their hands in some very dirty business. Let's put it like that. So we're now going to talk about Sheriff Tiraspol's dirty dealings. The man appearing on your screens now is a certain Mr. Victor Gushan, who owns the Sheriff Company, which is unsurprisingly who Sheriff Tiraspol are attached to. Now, Mr. Gushan is not just the owner of the company, he's also the Sheriff Tiraspol club president, make of that what you will. So basically, Victor Gushan was born in Tiraspol and grew up there, went to Russia and made his money. Now, effectively, Sheriff are anything and everything. You name it, Sheriff do it. They have petrol stations, convenience stores, electronic shops, even car dealerships now as well. So yeah, he made his money in Russia and went back and bought his boyhood club over and made them Sheriff Tiraspol and made them the most successful club in Moldova. So on the face of it, seems like quite a nice story. But as we know with Moldovan football and how this video's been going so far, it isn't a nice story. There's a lot of grubbiness involved in Mr. Gushan's success making, shall we say, with Sheriff Tiraspol, because as we know in Moldovan football, everything isn't as it seems on the surface. So while Sheriff Tiraspol have been doing a great job for sort of raising Moldovan football, because the amount of money Gushan has been pumping into them, it is sort of ruining the playing field in Moldova, because big clubs like Zimbabwe, Chisinau, who are obviously older clubs, are losing money and going down the Swanee and losing supporters. Sheriff themselves have been losing supporters. But anyway, on to the corruption side of things, which is, of course, the fact that Mr. Gushan has some dodgy connections, shall we say, and he also just happens to be the current honorary president of the Transnistrian FA. Again, make it that what you will. So Mr. Gushan has basically used Sheriff Tiraspol as a platform to promote his brand, to promote his company, and also to promote Transnistrian nationalism, Transnistrian separatism, and just basically do the Transnistrian government's bidding, shall we say. As well, so that's Mr. Gusan. He's the man behind Sheriff Tiraspol. And let's just say he's not a very nice man. It's not a local boy come good, making his local team good. It's a local boy went bad that is, through very bad means, taking Sheriff Tiraspol to the very top of Moldovan football and effectively ruined the Moldovan game. So we're now going to move on to looking at some of those dodgy connection within Transnistrian politics and everything that has led to Sheriff's success and what Mr. Gusan has been up to within Transnistrian politics, because he's been a very naughty boy, and this is all connecting back to Sheriff Tiraspol as a part of the story, which is the dealings, the corrupt dealings with the Transnistrian government. Now obviously I explain the situation with Transnistria and why the Transnistrian government is interested in football, because it's the best way of getting Transnistria out there. It's the best way of getting Transnistria onto the world stage and saying, look at us. So basically, that's one of the ways it works. The other way it works is it's an up yours to Moldova. Now, whilst that seems perfectly okay, it's just very, very corrupt, because Gusan and the president of Transnistria are very, very good friends, and they give each other a lot of money to do a lot of bad things. So Gusan says, I'll give you this amount of money if you speed up the work permit for such and such a player. And the president of Transnistria goes, well, I'll give you this amount of money for the club if you promise to get good players so that we can beat the Moldovan side. So that's the way it works. And also, Sheriff as a club are not shied away from doing political things. In their UEFA games, in the Europa League games, their qualifiers, they wore an armband, the captain wore an armband that was basically a Transnistria flag, which caused a lot of problems, especially when they played Steaua Bucharest a few years ago, of course, from Romania, and of course Moldova and Romania, that whole thing, that caused a lot of tensions. Again, the president of Transnistria seemed to find it hilarious. The former president of Transnistria is currently in prison in Transnistria for his dealings with Gusan. Of course, Gusan's far too powerful to touch. You can't put him in prison, but again, he's got a former president of Transnistria in prison, and the club are just heavily involved in Transnistrian politics. A lot of club officials sit in the Transnistrian parliament. They don't really have a parliament as such, but they sort of are heavily involved in the Transnistrian government and everything. You even see Sheriff Tiraspol players involved in military parades in Transnistria and everything. So, on floats in military parades in Transnistria and everything like that. So that is really, really dodgy. If you think about it, the government of a rogue state, a rogue breakaway state, is effectively giving the club millions and then vice versa to promote each other's interests and basically through corrupt means make Moldova look bad. And it's all part of the continuous sort of Cold War between Moldova. And you might think, well, it's good, Transnistria sort of getting themselves out there. Technically, it's subterfuge, which is really underhand. And they're using football, which is the people's game, to further their own agendas and geopolitics and everything like that, because Sheriff Tiraspol also haven't shied away from officially tweeting on their account in Russian about the war in Ukraine and everything like that, and officially backing Putin. They put Novorossiya, which is Putin's party, things on their official pages and everything like that, and there's a lot of propaganda about in the stadium as well. Obviously not in UEFA games, they'd be in trouble for that if they did that. But you sort of see where I am with this. And that really antipifies and sort of symbolises what is going on within Moldovan football. And that's why I really wanted to cover Sheriff and their dealings with the Transnistrian government and Gusan and what he's been up to, because that symbolises Moldovan football. Everything we've talked about so far, Sheriff is that all-in-one, the match fixing, the vested interests, the dodgy political connections. That is a byword for Moldovan football in general, and Sheriff will continue to dominate for years and years and years and kill the Moldovan game domestically. It might be good for Europe, but it'll kill the game domestically if Sheriff keep this up. So that was all the stuff about Moldovan football and Sheriff Tiraspol. Now going to move on to the outro. So that is us. We have dived into the murky depths of Europe's most corrupt footballing nation, Moldova, and I've got to say, you come out of this and you go, we are really lucky to have the league system that we do here in Scotland and the Premier League and everything, because whilst we moan about the old firm dominating or referees or whatever, or in England, Man City, all that, I think whilst we moan about all that, you've really got to look at what's been going on in Moldova, and I hope this video sort of makes us appreciate the game we have here in Scotland and the game we have in England and the game that we have in Germany and France and Spain, that although it does have its issues, it's nowhere near as bad as Moldova. And I hope it lets us appreciate what we have here in general, just looking at the situation that Moldova's in terms of corruption and everything like that. But I think, you know, it certainly was really interesting to research this video. I'm so glad you guys picked it. When I thought of this video idea and put it in the poll, I knew it would be a really interesting one to make, and it was. So many articles, so much to read, so much to watch, all talking about Moldovan football and the Transnistrian conflict and everything like that. So many interesting things, and there was so much that I could have put in this video, but we would have been here for hours if I could put everything that I was looking at in this video. So this one took a lot of research, but I was really happy to do it. I love doing it, and I was really happy to do it for you guys, and I hope you find it interesting. Again, something a bit different, looking at a country that hardly ever gets talked about, you know, a country that we usually just forget about, and I thought it would be good to raise Moldova's profile and sort of just talk about Moldovan football and the issues facing it. So I really enjoyed doing this one. Like, it's something a bit different. Thank you to everybody who voted on the poll. Like I was saying at the start of the video, great engagement yet again. I love engaging with you guys. I love speaking to you guys and seeing what your thoughts are and everything like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, remember to leave a like if you enjoyed. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe for more unique football and content like this. I'll see you all in a while. Jack out.